Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Low Code Cafe. This is episode number 95, and today we have a great topic that I think will be of interest for a long time, the art of making beautiful apps with Plantain App, and this is with guest presenter Aaron Lopez. So we'll get into that in a minute, but first let me introduce myself. My name is Dale Warner. I'm head of support for Plantain App. And so let me introduce you to the Low Code Cafe. This is an event that we do every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Central Time. And it's just a weekly webinar that's really aimed at our technical community where we talk about our updates, do some demos, do some hands-on coding, and our favorite when we have participation from within the community. So if you have something that you would be interested to show and you think would be of interest to our technical community, please do get in touch with us. We record all these and put them out on YouTube. So we have 94 episodes out on our Low Code Cafe channel, and lots of good content talks generally about low code and specifically about Plantain App. You can get to that YouTube channel through that QR code or in the emails that we send to you. Today's agenda, I'm going to talk briefly about our product roadmap, and then a few things about From the Trenches, our support segment, and then we'll turn it over pretty quickly to Aaron Lopez. You can engage with us through the chat or Q&A, or raise your hand if you want to ask a question in person and really put us on the spot. We also have a feedback form. You'll have links to that either in the invitation you received to this or I think that's the best place you'll find it, in the invitation. And if you'll give us feedback, then that tells us what more you'd like to see or what we could do better in this. So moving directly into our product roadmap updates, if you're keeping track of our development schedule, we've pushed back our next release a couple of weeks. It's gone now to June 15th for going into beta, with a release scheduled for June 27. There's a lot of paddling going on behind the scenes or under the surface, let's say, where we're setting up to do multi-environment and some other important directions to take the product. But the things that you're going to see in release 1.21 is going to be the ability to export and import entities, which should make it easier for those of you who run multiple environments or want to transfer content from transfer from between environments in whatever the scenario of that is. But that's just something that we're doing as part of a bigger product picture where we fully support going between multiple environments, so that if you, for example, have a development system, a staging system, and a production system, the ability to smoothly move between those in an organized fashion, and to support that very well. We are also working on enhancements to the way that hotfixes get installed or presented to you for installation, and the kind of things that you're going to see in that. We currently show every version of hotfix that is available. It'll be a more abbreviated and sensical approach to being able to install the latest hotfix, but also it helps us all the way across in our development process. For example, in one that's probably most visible to you, our beta testers would be able to receive hotfixes directly. So if something's discovered during beta that gets fixed by our development team, that it would be able to be installed directly through our hotfixes screen. So we're improving the way that we move hotfixes through the system, and so those are two of the ways that you'll see us improving in this next release. From there, I am going to go to our From the Trenches segment, and not much to mention here. We've previously released in our 120 version, we've already released 32 hotfixes. And just to kind of give context to that, we have released, in our 120 release, we did a very ambitious conversion, or the ability to implement Bootstrap 5. And that's a very pervasive, Bootstrap 3 versus Bootstrap 5, very pervasive capability within our system. And so it touched a lot of code, and we've released a lot of hotfixes. We've released 2 more this week, and I thought I would touch on them. One is quite cosmetic, about some help text overflowing on connectors, but also an enhancement where workflow, when it's duplicated, it makes more sense the way that it's duplicated. So first, to kind of show the cosmetic, I mean, it's kind of interesting, the level of detail. There's the very small things that we fix and the very large things that we fix. I'm going to refresh both of these to make sure they're active. Okay, so for example, if we were to do a new connector, and it is of the type, the dynamics, we had this help text now where this help text is scrollable. You can see the whole thing. Before, it was floating off into the ether and wasn't showing very well. So that's one that's an example of very cosmetic change. But workflows, this is a really good change. That if you have a workflow and you want to duplicate it for some reason, maybe you're going to make a variation of it, that we have this duplicate feature. And in the past, when you clicked this duplicate button, it would duplicate it and it would appear on the list. But depending on how you had the list of workflows sorted, you might not even see that it completed, and you wouldn't get any visual indication that something had happened. So now when you duplicate a workflow, it opens out to the new copy automatically and ready to edit. So it's very in your face that you have a copy and that you're working with it. You can rename it, whatever this is going to be, you know, version 2 or whatever you want, but now you can save that, and it's just very confirming that got completed. So a couple of small hotfixes that are included in today's release. I will also mention that we do another event on Fridays, this same hour, that is more of a conversation instead of a webinar, and you were invited to that. You should have an invitation to it as part of we email those out later today, but you can sign up for those and be part of them week by week. But it's a great opportunity to directly interact with us and to ask questions, and more important than interacting with us, but interacting with the community. That there's just, we see many problems solved just by bringing it to a group of people that use the software and really understand it. So take advantage of our community, and that's the low-code Campfire. Today's guest presenter, Aaron Lopez, has said that he will be in this one coming up this Friday. So if you have a more in-depth question or just want to talk about what you see today, be a great opportunity to go deeper. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron. And so I will quit sharing my screen, and Aaron can share his. And he's going to show you the art of making beautiful apps with Plant an App, what's necessary, introduce some concepts. Oh, and I didn't do it, but I will briefly show. We have links for this episode. I skipped past this slide, and I'm going to put these on our clipboard, so or on the chat, so that you'll be able to take a look at these things, both registering in advance for low-code Campfire, taking advantage of some of the other things that we offer. But then the last 5 links are things that Aaron is going to mention during his presentation. So I'll get that on the chat board here really quickly. But Aaron, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Okay. So let me just share my screen here. And can you see that okay?
Absolutely. Looks great.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thanks again, Dale. And hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Lopez, and I'm the founder and lead front-end developer of Wolfx Machina Interface Development. In today's session, I'm going to share with you an example of a highly customized, custom-designed website built with Plantin-App. And I'm going to show you a bit of behind the scenes and the tools I use to create those pixel-perfect designs. Before we jump into it, let me share with you some of my background. So since 2006, I've been working in the DNN content management system to create pixel perfect designs for my customers, whether that's websites or themes, structured content, mobile apps, or even custom email templates. Whatever that is, whatever user interface that is, my work involves making the best user experience that I can. So aside from creating beautiful interfaces, we put a lot of effort and focus into performance and accessibility as well. So with that, the first thing I generally like to do whenever I present sessions is sort of jump into showing you kind of some of the work that I do, just so we can all kind of understand and be on the same page. So I'd like to show some recent projects. So as you all are probably aware, there's the plantinapp.com website. So this is some of the work that we kind of do is creating those user interfaces. So making them very tightly integrated with the themes and the content modules, and making them fully responsive and editable and all that kind of stuff. So this one was a particularly specific job in that it had to be very responsive and supported a lot of different types of pages. So I think on something like the pricing page, you actually have a header background, and partners, I think you got a different kind of background, so it has to change the light mode, dark mode, depending on the scenario. One of my favorite pages is the use cases page, because it has some slick animation and all that kind of stuff. And one other particular project I wanted to show you was, this is a website for a fire safety company. And in particular, this is actually using the forms module. And what I wanted to show you specifically here was how designed this was. This is not your out of the box kind of typical action form module. We actually have, I think this is the section title, or I think it's just called title field. And then we have some kind of divider field as well. And you can see that there's a lot of work put into making sure that the fields and the inputs all look very, very designed for this particular website. Even down to the level of skinning the upload control. So you see, this is actually the typical field called single file upload. Mm-hmm. And that is designed down to that level to make it match the rest of the brand. So yeah, those were the two that I wanted to kind of highlight first. And yeah, let's take a look at the next one. Oh, and if you wanted to view more at this time, you could go to my website, wolfxmachina.com/portfolio. And I've got a few more projects in there that a lot of them use action forms, so you can check those out and you can see the different designs of those forms. Okay, so today I want to present a custom design for a telecommunications app. So let's take a look at this recent project that I worked on with the Plantin-App team. So let's see. So in this project, we were provided both the desktop and the mobile designs. So that included the phone as well as the tablet. So this design, in this particular project, we were given very clear instructions that it needed to be what people call pixel perfect. So they want it to match the design exactly. And that's one reason, is because of the user experience was so specific. But it was also because it actually had to match other websites and other user interfaces for this customer. So we had to match things like the header to make sure the heights were the same and the link sizes and the font sizes and everything was exactly the same. So just kind of, I thought I'd just give you a little tour first. So here is the, this is the large screen version. There's actually a larger screen version on a larger, if the window is larger, it actually even has, it breaks out a little bit more. But as you can see, it's a relatively simple design from just appearance, but there's a lot of kind of custom things in here. So let's take a look. So this is actually an action form in this main column, and this sidebar column, this is an action form as well. And this page for tickets has both action form and action grid. So we have these really custom inputs. There's even a flat picker in here. And this is an action grid down here. And going down to the bottom, we have a couple of action grids here, but this one in particular has this really nice pagination. Again, very custom, very set for this design. I think if we go to here, we can just do some sample submissions. Oh, let's see if I do this. Success message. So we've customized every aspect of this. I think I can reset this and submit an error message. There we go. I think this is also an error message. And then I wanted to show you on this. So this is the large screen. This is not the largest screen, but if I go here, I'm just going to open up a Dev Inspector toolbar, and I'm just going to emulate the screens. So if I click here, now I'm emulating an iPhone. So this is what it looks like in an iPhone. Obviously, the header gets simplified, and then we have the stacked columns. The navigation actually converts to this icon navigation down at the bottom. So a user can just tap on that with their finger and go down. That's sort of what it looks like. And let's switch this to an iPad. Let's go iPad Air. I'll increase this size. So this is more like a tablet view. So it's similar to a mobile view in that it's the simplified header, but then we have just narrower columns. If I switch it here, this is one of the views of the navigation. So again, this sidebar navigation is just simplified. It's sort of shifted over. Yeah, I think it's a little bit taller as a result.
So that was the landscape view that you just...
Yeah, so this is landscape view in an iPad. If I go to, I'll just do a responsive view just to show you really quickly here. Can I actually get this bigger? Oh, I guess I can't. I was going to try to show you even bigger, but I obviously only have so much screen size. Oh, I guess I could just use this. So if I go to like a screen that's, let's say 2500, you can see the navigation sort of reaches its maximum left-hand distance, basically, and then it just stops there. You can sort of see the level of detail that kind of goes into a site like this when you're aiming for pixel perfect. So let me just get out of here for a second. And I'm just going to resize the browser just to kind of show you what that's like. So to resize down, so you can see it when it switches over when it runs out of space. Couple of neat things overall about this is that this navigation is actually a single navigation. It's not one navigation with a certain template and then switches over to a different one. This navigation is powered by the DNN pages with page icons for the icons. And it just, the CSS decides when it goes to the bottom and all that. So it's one navigation to manage one C# Razor template. Okay, so let me just take a look here. Oh yeah, now I want to show you what that looks like as a person logged in. So I'm just going to drag this window over. So this is what us as developers see. And if I go into edit mode, you'll see the breakdown of the modules. So I only have two panes. Actually, I might have more than two panes in this one, but I have two columns, and then I have I've got special containers to apply the card shadow box on each of these modules. So as you can see here, it's just a DNN page with a theme set, and then I just dragged and dropped form and grid modules on the page, and then there are containers being set for them, but it's nothing terribly special in that sense, other than that. One thing about it is that we do have custom template set. So here we've actually got template Tailwind set here, and I'll talk about that in just a bit. Okay, so let's move this back over here. Now that you've seen the end product, let me give you a high-level breakdown of what goes into that. So overall, there are two things that we do. So the first one is theming. So we theme the overall layout and the common components like buttons and cards and input fields and all that kind of stuff. So the theme does a lot of the heavy lifting. The second part of it is skinning the action form and action grid templates. I'll just jump to this thing, but that's basically the two steps involved. So let's start with step one, of course, and let's talk about that. So for the overall layout, so I'm talking about the header and the footer and the sidebar navigation, the general kind of grid, everything like that. Like it includes more than that, but starting with that, those are what I use is a framework called Tailwind CSS. Tailwind CSS is a framework similar to Bootstrap in that it provides a consistent way for developers to create user interfaces, but it's only CSS, so there's no JavaScript component, and it's implemented through what are called utility classes. So meaning you add many classes to a single element to provide the layout and style. And I'll show you that in just a second. But so instead of having a class called card and then applying it to a div, you actually apply a classes like shadow, padding, margin, flex, all these kind of utility classes to a single element to give it its style. Perhaps the most major advantage to using Tailwind CSS versus Bootstrap is the ability to create extremely specific and custom layouts and designs quickly. So Bootstrap is very opinionated in what it does and how it sort of behaves. And of course, you can modify it, while Tailwind CSS is unopinionated in that it means you can shape it to whatever design you need it to be. So looking at a site like this is sort of ripe for something like Tailwind because it's an atypical layout that requires a lot of different layouts and different responsive breakpoints. And even modifying font sizes and things like that. So another neat feature of Tailwind is that it has the ability to be complementary to any other framework. So instead of competing with Bootstrap, it actually acts alongside Bootstrap. So both Tailwind and Bootstrap can be used simultaneously throughout a project. As you can imagine, this is really important for Plant and App projects, as Bootstrap 5 is bundled into the modules. And so there are instances where you actually do want to use Bootstrap and you want to use those components, but you also want the fine control over the rest of the layout. So let me show you a little bit about what Tailwind is like. I'm not going to run through installation or anything like that, but I thought I'd just show you. We'll dig into a little bit of code so you can kind of see what goes into that. So Tailwind is a post-CSS plugin. So it basically, long story short, it kind of uses JavaScript to kind of compile thousands and thousands of utility classes. So I'm just going to start my build. So I just do npm run dev, and now it's turned on a watcher. So it's watching source files and input file for the classes that I'm going to use. So if I open up index.html, which I think I have right here, I was just doing a little testing earlier. So let's open up index so you can kind of see what's going on here. Okay, can you see that okay? Hopefully. So now that I have this Tailwind running, I'm just working in a local file called index.html. So let's say that I wanted to, okay, so I have this big blue block, and it's a 3-column thing. Let's say that I wanted to change that to red. I would just change the class to bg red 400, and suddenly the watcher sees this class is being used, so it adds it to the CSS build. So if I look at my build, you can actually find, you know, bg red 400. So you see it gets added automatically. So going back here, let's say that you wanted to change the font size of this first column. I could say text, 5XL. And then it increases the size, and font bold increases that size. And as I type these classes out, it's going to add it to the build here. So I think font bold probably already exists because I probably used it, but I don't know if text 5XL was used, probably not. So suddenly that gets added to that build. So as I use classes, it just adds it to the build. And what's really nice about that is when you're using utility classes, it doesn't double up on them. So if I use 5XL here, and then I use text 5XL here, it doesn't add it twice to the build because it only needs it once. So as you can see, it's not used a second time because it's already there. So one neat thing too, one of the many neat things about Tailwind is that you can actually change anything responsively. So let's say that on a small screen, I wanted it to be, italic. Oops. So it's italic, but then if I get to a larger screen, I want it to be not italic. Then when it's on a small screen, it's italic. And once I get to a larger screen, oh, what's happening? LG not italic. Suddenly it becomes not italic. So you can kind of see how that gets really, really useful very quickly. We can create different grids and different layouts responsively just by modifying HTML classes. So let's say that, I use it in this example here, but let's say that we have a section and we want this section to be a 2-column grid. So let's say, this is going to be where the navigation goes. And then this is where the main content goes. So start with this. So I've got this simple unstyled thing here. What I can do is I can go on the section, I'll go class grid. So that makes it a grid. And then I'll go grid calls to, and I'll put a gap of, let's say 10. So now suddenly I have a 2-column grid with a gap of 10 between it. But that's sort of, it's a mobile first. So you're starting off with small screens. So let's say I only wanted grid columns 2 to apply on a larger screen. So I would simply just put an LG prefix, and then suddenly it stacks until it gets to the LG screen size. So that's how I create sort of layouts that are extremely custom using Tailwind. There's a lot of other really amazing features that warrant its own entire sessions and entire reading of documentation to kind of go through all that. Like you can do things like arbitrary values. So let's say that I wanted, a padding bottom of, let's say it's 123 pixels. Well, I could just put the value inside these square brackets, and then suddenly my element has a padding bottom of 123 pixels. Let's see. Yeah, so you can see it, it's added there. So that's Tailwind in sort of a nutshell. Two things I did want to show you about Tailwind that I think are really important. So one is with every Tailwind project, you actually have a config file, and that config file is where you define a lot of your styles. So you can define your breakpoints, you can define all of your colors, all of your fonts, your box shadows, all this kind of stuff. Any stuff that's, I consider like part of the visual language or the brand language or the brand design, you kind of imbue Tailwind with these values so that when you're working with it, it just uses those values. The way it kind of works in terms of this content block here, if you notice, you might notice some familiar things. It's actually looking through my project to find classes that are being used. And this is really useful for Plant and App because we're going to have to look through the desktop modules folder and those templates. So we can look through those files and if it picks up on any of the classes being used, it applies it into the build. So two things that are important when using Tailwind on a Plant and App site. And these are not absolutely necessary, but they are important in some cases, and that's disabling pre-flight and prefixing. So those are two steps that are really important. So I'll show you those really quick. So pre-flight is like the CSS normalize, and resetting of things. Because Tailwind kind of resets everything and flattens it. We can actually disable that part of Tailwind, and that's important when, if you have Bootstrap 5 being loaded onto a site, it's going to load, normalize, and it's going to have a lot of styles and everything. You can disable Tailwind's pre-flight so that it can seamlessly integrate into it. So I'm just going to show you that here. I'm just going to copy this code. So if we look at the build file, you'll notice at the top of the build file, we have a bunch of CSS that does like resets. So we've got, all these resets basically. If we go into our config file, we can modify it so that we can disable the pre-flight. And then if I look again, it should have removed all of those things. So now we can integrate. That's one step of integrating with another framework like Bootstrap. The other side of it is we have to prefix our classes. So as you saw earlier, I was writing classes like grid and grid columns and all that kind of stuff. Some classes are shared with Bootstrap. So if we look at something like, go back to here, a class like P5 is both a Tailwind and a Bootstrap class. So obviously that would have a conflict because they're going to have different values. So what we can do is we can actually easily prefix our build with the class TW, or you could do literally anything else. We could do, let's say, PAA. This is going to error out right now because I have other files that rely on it. So I'll try to kind of show you, but it's actually erroring right now, but I'll try to show you. So Now, instead of using these typical containers, you would actually do PAA dash, or typical classes, you would actually do PAA dash container or PA dash or PAA dash PY20 to apply the padding. So this is where you could make sure not to have the same class. So PAA for the prefix and then padding 5 being the actual class. So now you can have both the P5 class in Bootstrap and the Tailwind class. So I'm going to actually undo those things because I just wanted to show you a couple other things about having this running. Okay, so how are we doing for time? Okay.
Sorry, we're great on time. We've got about 20
Okay,
minutes.
awesome. So I'll give you a quick little tour of like my typical setup, but I'm using something called Post CSS Import as well in this. It's just a package that I installed into Tailwind that works really, really well. I think it's sort of integrated. So what that does is that in my build process, it's looking for this file called tailwind.css, which I'm actually importing a bunch of other CSS files. You don't have to do this. This is just the way that I do it because, I mean, you have to do at least these 3, which are base components and utilities. That's the requirement of Tailwind. But you can actually do a post CSS import for other files. So that's how I kind of break up some of the files. And the important thing is I actually have my own action form and action grid CSS files. So this is where I do a lot of the customizations for action form and action grid. I can put in my own styling. And you might be asking at this point, well, why do you have these CSS files if you were applying CSS classes to every single thing? And the reason why is you sometimes actually need to pull things out of, like in 2 cases. One, cases where you can't modify the class and you need to apply style to it, you need to bring it into a CSS file. So that's where I do things for action form, because not all of action form's template is editable. It has a bunch of classes that you can't change. So that's where I pull it out and I apply the style here. The other case is where you have a lot of repetition, like on something like a button. So I've got a buttons, CSS file where I style buttons, so I can have one class on it. But I will show you a little bit more of that action form thing in just a second. The next thing I wanted to show you was, so that's step 1, that's theming. So generally I use Tailwind CSS because I think it's the best tool for custom layouts and custom designs. And you can use prefix and preflight. Prefix and disable preflight to make sure it can work with any framework. The next part, step 2, is the skinning the form and grid. So typically what I do, and the reason why step 2 is skinning the form and grid, and it feels like much later, is because my themes typically, they do the heavy lifting. So I put a lot of the work into making sure even form input styles are styled here at this phase of theming. And just to give you a quick little demo into that, in my form CSS file, I've got the form fields styled by their type. So you actually see type equals text, type equals email, equals URL. And so that picks up on the markup that's being generated. And so I can actually style those things by their type, not their class, which is actually a much nicer, simpler way to style form inputs. So you can see I style, this is styling any form inputs, but then I also style the ones for action form and action grid. So step 2, which goes into skinning the form and grid. So once I've got like layouts and stuff, and I've got, you know, all the navigations all worked out, and I've got, you know, basic form styles. What I do is I create copies of the templates in of the desktop modules folder. So in the case of action form, it's in the, I'm sure most people here are really familiar with this, but you go into action, you go into desktop modules, DNN Sharp, action form, templates, form, and then usually there's like Bootstrap here, there's other templates here, but I copy the latest one. I think the latest one's called Bootstrap 5 maybe. You copy that one, and then you just rename it. You rename the folder, and I think that's all you need to do for action form. You just rename the folder, I believe. I don't know if someone might correct me on that one. It's been a little bit since I've done this, but you copy that. Now you have that copy. So when you go into your settings here, you will have a template Tailwind CSS. So yeah, these are the other ones. So usually I would copy, one of these. Now you've got Tailwind CSS as an option. And then the big thing that I do as well is I disable or uncheck include Bootstrap. And then this is where you'd go into those templates. So let's see if I can pull up those templates here. Then what you do is you go into like the controls, and if you need to change anything to style, then you go into these controls and just make your changes. The truth is, like, a lot of the time you actually don't need to change many of these things. In my case, sometimes I would change things like upload single or upload multi because I wanted a really specific design, as I showed you on that other website that had an upload. I think actually this site has an upload too. Let me just do a quick check. Yeah, so I think it's on this page. Like this upload, this is just the single file upload, I think. So I think even multi-file upload has it modified as well. But you go in and you change your markup as you need. The nice thing about creating your own template is now you have both a backup copy of a working one in case you break your own, but also, there's no conflict there. So that's how you would do that. So I would go for this particular control, I would go into, I think, upload multi.xsl. Now, that is action form. Action grid is a little bit, there's a couple more steps involved, but it's really quite easy and well documented. So let me just find that again. There's this older blog post, but it's still, I think, quite relevant, which is right here. So I think Dale's included the link to that. And there's a video from a few years ago, but it's still quite relevant where you can create your own grid template. Now, again, this is very similar to the action form step. You're basically copying an existing action grid template, renaming it, but then there's a couple more steps that you have to cover, but it's more or less the same steps as action form. Once you've done that, you can go in and you can modify things. In particular with this design, I modified the pagination because we had this very nice pagination designed, and we wanted to break out from the classic pagination that's included by default. So I think that one is, if I go to, here we go, action grid, static, and grid. I think it's like grid.html, and you can open this and you can modify your, pagination is like here. Okay, so let's see where we're at. So in summary, you have basically two steps. You have your custom themes, and they should probably, if you're going to do really custom designs, I would highly recommend Tailwind CSS. It's not for the faint of heart. It's a much more advanced level way of just front end development in general, but it's extremely powerful. And yeah, I would that's how I would do it. And then your module templates, which are just copies of the existing templates and then just modified. Okay, so at this time, maybe we should open the floor to some questions.
So if you have questions, you can use either the question and answer or the chat. I was doing a little look-see behind the scenes when you were mentioning about custom grid and custom templates. We did in Low Code Cafe number 23, and I've just put that link on the chat as well. We covered how to do a custom grid template. The process for form is very similar. We probably have some examples of that one out there as well. But the idea is that since we produce, for example, the Bootstrap 5 template that we just recently released, that's our standard template. You can, as Aaron has demonstrated, you can make a copy of that and then do your own from that. The benefit, of course, is that you get complete control over it. Part of the cost that's associated with that then is that it's separated from our released template, and so anything moving forward, you take responsibility for the custom templates that you develop. You can always revert back to Bootstrap 5 or take another copy and make your changes, do differencing, whatever you need to do. But it's a great capability that we build in that allows you to open up and completely customize the templating that happens within the product. So we did get a question from Jim Anthony about whether there are site performance implications from adding Tailwind, and is it added at the page level or the site level?
Yeah, great question, Jim. So I'm glad you asked that one. One of Tailwind's greatest features is its performance. I haven't seen a framework that has better performance than Tailwind yet. So because it's using utility first, the utility first paradigm, if you use a class once, it's only needed that one time. So if I use a class called like BG primary, if I use it 1,000 times more, it's only added once. So what that results in is your file size. I don't know if you can see this, but this is my dev Tailwind output file, and it's only, it's only down here, it says 85K, but my minified one is 67. So compare that to maybe Bootstrap, like full-blown one, which comes in, I think, 250, 350K. So typically this, it's going to be a fraction of the size. So Tailwind's performance as a CSS framework is unrivaled at this time. You get even better performance when you are, working in like, like when you're not styling components, I guess. But even with that, you're going to be faster than the out-of-the-box Bootstrap. And as for site level or page level, it's applied at the page level. So it's actually, the way that I'm doing it is I'm applying the Tailwind styles in the DNN theme. So the theme powers all of the style, does all the heavy lifting for the majority of the site. So including the form and the grid. I hope that answers that question.
Great. So, and so we have also another one. Yep. Jim says thank you, and Albert asks, with Bootstrap, new versions are always coming out. With Tailwind CSS, how difficult is the process of upgrading to the latest version of Tailwind CSS? Yeah,
thanks, Albert. Typically, upgrading to Tailwind takes about 60 seconds, I would say. I do it every single time I open up a project that I haven't worked on in a week or two. I'll just upgrade it. But they're always pumping out releases, which is really nice. I think Bootstrap's release cycle is a little bit slower. Tailwind seems to be releasing every 6 weeks or so because they follow the shape up paradigm. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that one. That's like the 37 signals Basecamp way of releasing software. So I think it's every 6 weeks you see a release. It takes about 60 seconds to upgrade. The hardest upgrade I've had took about 15, 20 minutes, but that was because it was, I think, a year out of date. But it's very, very easy. So the reality is that those utility classes don't change very often, very rarely. So, and that's only if it has a very good reason. So I think like there was one change. They used to have white space, no dash wrap for, making white space not wrap, but then they changed it to white space wrap. But even in that, they actually still kept the old one. So it's not like if upgrading, you're going to lose classes or anything, or you have to switch out a ton of classes. A lot of time, they just introduce changes that are written a different way, and then you can continue to use the old ones until, forever, basically. But yeah, upgrading, super, super simple. No problem.
Okay. Still time for some final questions. So if you have them, please please pop them into the chat or the Q&A. So Aaron, your typical project, somebody comes to you with a complete design, a pixel perfect. We need our site to look like this, and that's where your project starts, right?
Typically, yeah. So a lot of my customers are design agencies who want a developer who can execute on that pixel perfect design. A lot of them are tech companies who maybe they've got strong front end developers who are really strong at JavaScript and stuff, but getting that perfect design and the responsiveness and the speed and performance, those kind of companies hire me as well. We actually have designers who work for us. So companies who don't have a design, they're coming to us and they just want the best user interfaces they can. They're coming to us as well. Mm-hmm. My business partner Benny's in this call as well. We also do DNN module development. So we build custom modules typically in Vue, but we've built them in Angular as well. So when they, we build modules for DNN sites as well as Ionic apps and Ionic apps integrated with DNN sites. So we kind of cover a lot of bases with our company. But
so somebody who, but kind of what you've shown today with Tailwind, somebody who wants to get their hands dirty, really learn something new, then this would be a starting point, a launching off point. If they have a design and need to be implemented, that's the kind of thing that you could pick up on as well and help them get to the finish line with something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So there doesn't seem to be any final questions. Do you have any final thoughts? Otherwise, I'll close this out.
Let me check my notes.
Contact information, perfect.
Yeah. So, to summarize, this is how we do it. This is how we develop custom designs. We're really proud of that. This is something we work on all the time. Some of our sites, like I think one of the ones I showed you, this one actually gets like 100 in Lighthouse Labs scoring. I think it's definitely worth checking out. It's not for the faint of heart. You have to have a kind of advanced level of CSS, but I would definitely check it out if you are serious about creating those things. Otherwise, I'd be happy to help out. My contact information. If anyone wants to reach out with any questions, you can visit my website wolfxmachina.com, or you can send me an email, aaron.lopez@wolfxmachina.com. I'm also on Twitter at AJPLopez for my own account, and then wolfxmachina for my company account.
Perfect. And I see that we have a question from Matthew about what PAA, what the Planet app might do with regard to Tailwind as a standard offering. And the answer to the question is, I don't know, but I've heard talk that the fact, I mean, currently we offer Bootstrap 5 and Page Builder as a standard spot for you to develop, or get your own Bootstrap 5 theme. So whether there's been some internal discussion about the possibility of offering another starting spot, and I don't quite know where that one's going yet, so I don't want to get too far ahead on that one, but it's a good question. So just as a reminder, Aaron is going to join us. So if you on Friday in the low code Campfire, it's just 10 o'clock Central Time, same hour. And so if you want to go in depth, or if you got a more specific question that's maybe only you didn't want to share as a general question, but rather go a little bit deeper, there'd be a great opportunity to do that on Friday. And with that, I think we'll call this a successful low code cafe. Aaron, I want to thank you for joining us and presenting. I think it's an important topic. It's, yes, the sites have to work right, and we focus on that week by week, but then there's they have to look right as well. So I think you've filled in a great blank for us. And let's see, I am going to share my screen and kind of close us out here. I again want to thank everyone for attending today. It was a good session. We're seeing thank yous coming across on the chat, so thank you for that. We will see you guys next week, this same hour, for another episode of the Low Code Cafe, and hopefully we'll see you in Campfire as well. Thanks all.